screen, it might be a little bit small. A good time for a spam insurance call. Just cancel that. Okay, so not interested in that right now. Right, so that's typically things that you can do with the Creator Kit. So this details list over here, I mean, to style that in a Canvas app without this, it'll keep you busy for a packed lunch. Okay, pack it because you're going to be busy. Cool drink, some salmis, you're going to be busy for a while. But with this, it's really easy to set this up and to get this up and going. So it really is fantastic and phenomenal. Right, so things like pop-ups, these sort of things that you can now just use out of the box in quotes. And also you'll see, I remember a couple of years ago when Power Apps just started, there was this big thing about drop shadows. I don't know, Michael, you still did a presentation on drop shadows. There's now a thing, there's a control in Fluent UI that's called an elevation control, where you give this thing elevation. You don't have to go and do all of these fancy SVG or HTML or anything. You can just pop the elevation control on there, tell it how high you want it to, how far off the screen you would like it to appear, and then it works. Right, so it gives you a quick introduction. It tells you what you're for and what you're going to get, and then there's a disclaimer. Okay, so read the disclaimer. They actually advise you to, if you pick up problems, to log the problems on GitHub. Right, keep that in mind. Right, so next step, install the kit. So we've now downloaded it. We're going to download it from GitHub, and then we're going to install it. And at this stage, it still gives you pretty good documentation on this side on how to get up and running with it. If you go into GitHub, you'll see that on the right-hand side, it's got a little releases over there. See my screen, if you click on releases, that away. You don't need to see that. So there you'll see is the Creator Kit, the July version, the June version. This is the one that Microsoft Docs is currently pointing to, in the May version. So you want the July version. And very soon, hopefully, you'll want the August version when that's released, hopefully soon. Right, and also another good news is it's also released now in an unmanaged version, where previously you couldn't. So you guys, everybody happy with the term managed versus unmanaged? For those who are not, just a quick, an unmanaged solution means you can import it into your environment and you can customize this thing, you can change it, you can do with it whatever you like, but you can't uninstall it then, because then installing an unmanaged version is saying, I'm taking responsibility for everything that this thing is going to ingest into my environment. I'm happy with the fact that I'm not going to be easily able to clean it up again, but you can then go to town. So typically you'll install the unmanaged version into a development environment. And then you'll export a managed solution out of your development environment and then move it into UAT in production. And then you're not supposed to be making changes in UAT in production. Not supposed to. And all right, so I recommend for this, we're going to actually do the managed version. So there you'll see it, simply click on that, and that'll download it. Thank you, Microsoft, for your awesome bandwidth. This is a great time for Windows updates, iPhone updates. The time is now. This being recorded, everybody can see I'm using a free version of WinRAR. That's bad. All right, excellent. So there's the Creator Kit. And to now install it, you'll simply go into your environment. I've created a Creator Kit Demo 2 environment just to show you how to import it. Go to Solutions on the left-hand side. Sorry, before you import it, it's very important that you enable code components as a feature set in the environment. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So you're going to the Admin Center, which also got a bit of a revamp recently. Quite nice. Even says welcome, David. I feel welcome already. So you're going to your environment. You could talk about that later. That is good. Yeah, that's you played around with it. Right, then you want to go to product, features. Sorry. Table it over there. The majority of these controls, but a lot of these controls have code, use the code components, in other words, the PCF controls, but some of them also just use normal Canvas app components, like the panel and the dialog box. These sort of things are very easy to manipulate. You don't need to jump into code for that. Right, so once that's enabled, remember to click on Save. And now you can go back into the environment, try to get demo 2. Sorry, I'm still in the admin center. So right, so you go to Solutions, and you tell it you're now going to be importing. This is the wrong one. I want to be in Creative Kit 2. Solutions, and now I tell it you're going to import the solution. Not new, import. Go to Browse. See, there's the file that you downloaded earlier. Simply select that. Say Next. The awesome bit about the solutions as well, and the managed solutions, is if in the future there's a new version of this, to update this is exactly the same process. You'll go and import this. It'll pick up that this is an upgrade to an existing environment, and it will simply go and place all the components, and you'll be able to use the latest functionality everywhere in your apps. You won't have to go and manually remove things. You can just go into the app. It'll tell you there's an update. Do you want to use it? Yes, and then you're off to the races. Right, so that's importing the Creative Kit. That takes about a minute or two. It's actually quite fast. So I'm going to jump over to the environment where I've imported this previously to show you what you get out of the box. If I go into Creative Kit and I go and open up the solution, you'll see that there are 3 Canvas applications. And the majority of the work that we're going to be doing from here on forward is going to be in these applications, because they've done a brilliant job at setting up a demonstration app or a reference app to show you how all of these components interact with the Canvas app. So we're going to head out of this for now, but just be aware of the fact that you can go and have a look at this if you want. Right, so if you go into apps, keep in mind after you do the import, I have seen recently that sometimes if you do changes or create new apps or import apps, it takes a few minutes to register on the apps pane. So for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a caching issue or whatever the case may be. But essentially, if you after the import and you don't see it, don't spend time on troubleshooting it. Go and have some coffee, come back, and you'll probably be there. Right. So the first thing I'm going to show you is the Creative Kit reference app. And you can just launch that in normal run mode or runtime. You don't need to edit that at all. And this is a phenomenal application. Not only does it give you use cases for all of these different components, it also gives you best practices. So if you have a look at the auto width label, so this is a normal text label, but I'm sure for the guys who've used Canvas apps before, sometimes you don't know how long this thing should be, and you actually want it to scale with the content. And previously, you couldn't do that. Well, guess what? Now you can. And what's awesome is you'll see that it gives you best practices and do's and don'ts. It tells you what to do with this thing and what not to do with it. And then it gives you a quick example of how this works. So you'll see there is the lorem ipsum sit omet text. And you can go and change around with the number of words to use. And as it has more content in it, the label automatically scales horizontally. So that's absolutely phenomenal. And if you go into the code section, You can see the first time I opened this up, it didn't look like PowerFX. So I thought maybe that's the actual code that's used in the PCF. But if you look closely, it is actually PowerFX. You can just ignore that first bit. And then over here where it says the text property for this label is currently set to this formula. And that's how it does what it needs to. So for the text label, it doesn't necessarily make too much sense, but some of these other controls like your fluent list and your command bar and these sort of things, this becomes extremely important. And the Microsoft documentation also isn't very clear on the kind of parameters you can call to it, where the GitHub documentation is brilliant. Let me actually just open up the GitHub documentation as well. So we've got on the Microsoft stuff, they tell you search for code. I'll find it in the documentation. It says somewhere where to find the actual reference documentation for the components on GitHub. It's not in the same repository as we download it from. So that's just important to note. So I'll make sure I get it to you now. All right, so that's the auto width label, which is fantastic. The next one is a very sexy icon. You can have more intelligent icons that's almost like a button and an icon combined. And you can do styling through it. You can do on select events. You can do everything that you can with a normal button and an icon and more. So same on this side, if you go to code, you'll see that these are the different parameters that you can set for that icon and then how it would change accordingly. So again, there's a whole list of do's and don'ts. There's actually very valuable stuff in there. Go look at that do's and don'ts. It's not just verbiage. It's actually very, very valuable. So there you'll see you can actually easily disable those buttons as well. So if you want to tie this back to certain scenarios in your apps, you can very easily do that to say if certain fields are blank or if the form isn't valid, then you can disable this button or this icon so that it's not visible. And if you have a look at you'll see that each one of these screens have what is called a pivot. So this is actually one of the components as well. It's called a pivot, where you can say, show me what it looks like in the app, or show me the code that configures this thing. So if you go into the app side, you'll be able to play around with it. And then you can see some examples of it, where you can say, set the focus of this thing, show the fill, show the border, whether it should be left or right, aligned, and all of this. It's really phenomenal. These guys did a fantastic job at this. All right, so that's the icon. Now the next one, I didn't think was possible, but it's possible. If you think about the auto width label, and you're impressed by this is going to blow your mind. A resizable text area. So think of a text input that the user can resize on the fly. So I can go and click there and then make it smaller or bigger. Currently set to only do vertical resizing, the property that you can set to do both. So I can now click in the corner and make this thing bigger and smaller at runtime. How awesome is that? That is. Look, I don't know what happens to the rest of the controls on the screen when you start moving this thing, but that is brilliant. And again, you can do things like set the focus on it. So it's got all of those on-chain or trigger events. It's very like allow spell check. It's important if you're from Pretoria, then enable the spell check. And then you can also see the code in the back end. So these are all of the parameters that you can set on this thing to make it do what it does. Right, so breadcrumbs. Again, do's and don'ts. So these are a breadcrumb. Now previously, that part wouldn't have been too difficult in a Canvas app. You'd have a horizontal gallery and you'd have a text label and a chevron and you're off to the races. But to do stuff like this, to say that the breadcrumb width, and then it automatically creates an overflow area. Okay, now there I'm impressed. Or you can say you want the overflow to happen either in the beginning of the, so let's first create an overflow, either in the beginning of the breadcrumb or sort of in the middle or the second last. I mean, that's phenomenal. So yeah, great work from the guys. Next one is a command bar. And actually for quite a long time, we've preferred to use command bars to buttons, because every time you want a new action or something on the form, you had to find a place for it and put a button there and style it and tell it what to do on the certain real estate states. But the way we did that with a gallery with a whole lot of things in it, and it was just always clunky. It was never that smooth, where this thing is absolutely phenomenal, where you'll see things like I'm creating like flyout menus. So you can go and say new email or calendar. If you click on that, it creates a or a trigger event in the app where you can then launch normal PowerFX code. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. It's very easy to create these things, to style them, to update them dynamically, inject collections and tables into them dynamically so they respond depending on what's happening on the screen. So this is phenomenal. I've been having such great time with command bars. So you'll see it also has the overflow area, and all of this is out of the box. So you want a new command bar, you go and update one line or one object in PowerFX, and there's a new command available to your application. Phenomenal stuff. You really want to use the command bar. Yes. There's one in here as well. It just works very nicely. Yeah, so there's an expander from the left, and then you've got a panel from the right. And then you can create, the panel the guy who did that was just very clever with it. Yeah, it's brilliant. So what they did is they give you this component, and remember, a component sits outside of the app. So it's usually very hard to interact with a component. But now, that component has got an output property for content X and Y and width and height. So if you tell anything to follow that panel around, it'll just always sit on top of it. And whatever you do with that panel, that thing will look like it's embedded into the panel. So it's phenomenal stuff. We'll get to that. I digress. All right. So next one is the expand menu. So that's exactly what we spoke about. So this whole thing where you'll give this a normal table with objects in it, and then it'll do that for you in a very nice and slick way. Look at the code to actually make that happen. All you do is you wrap the object into a table function, because it needs to be passed a table. So you can either give it a collection, or you can do it in the component and just wrap it into a table. And there it simply says what's the icon you want to use, what's the label name, and then what is the screen that it should navigate to. And that's it. And then the rest line up. You throw it onto your app, preferably in a layout containers. For those of you who haven't worked with layout containers, trust me, they're your best friend. That's the friend you haven't met yet. You want to meet that friend. It just makes your life so much easier with Canvas apps. And all of these things, well, most of them, work extremely well in layout containers. I'll show you things like the command bar. It just works like a charm. Right, context menus. So if you really want to spoil your users and you want to give them that functionality of, right-click on something to rename it and something like that. This is an example of what it can do. So there's the context area. If you click on that, it just gives you these properties again, or these objects. And again, these things you just pass through a normal table. If you click on new, you'll see it passes an event to the main app, and then you'll use a switch statement to pick up that event So if the event is new item, then go and do the following, run the following PowerFX code. It's as simple as that. It really is phenomenal. And again, it's got a very similar pattern where you'll pass a table with objects into the component, and that's how it knows what it is that you want to show. So there you'll see that there's the new item, rename, edit, properties disabled, those sort of things. So this is phenomenal. Spend some time on understanding these things. Things like showing what the parent on the command bar, for example, we have a new button or a new command, and then you've got a flyout menu. That's very simple to configure with these parameters and these properties if you understand them. All right, next one is a navigation. Right, so there you'll see on the left-hand side, we've actually got this collapsible section or area or outline where you've got these things that you can, again, ingest to a table, and that'll surface very similar to like an expander, but for a different use case where you can use that. Then you can say, change the colors, change the icon colors and all of these sort of things. But the nice thing is, and we'll get to this, if you look at the colors that's used in these apps, it's all, or in these components, it's all developed in a very uniform way. So if you have, and there's actually a theme editor as part of this kit, where you can give it your primary colors and these sort of things, and it'll throw an object, the PowerFX object at you. You just copy that into a variable, and you link that variable to these components, and they all light up with those colors and those shadings and everything. It's brilliant. It really is fantastic. So other than just using the components, spend some time on this reference app, because there's also some very cool technical tips and tricks on how to get these things to work in the way that it does. Yes. You could do that. Yes, so for the people on the call, Monet asked, where's the microphone? This one. There you go.
So the question is that on the nav, if you've got a data binder, let's say accounts and contacts, get the way that's structured, how can you actually take that request from data, transform it?
Yes, so that will actually be quite easy with this component. If you've got enough screen real estate, so if you've got 1,000 contacts, it's going to help you much. But you can very easily tell the Canvas app to go and have a look at the data in the data source, and then put it into this format for these objects, for the table that this needs, and it'll light up with the right information.
I can convert table to generate binders.
I'll show you now. In the app, there's input properties that you give it tables. Then it reads that, and then it renders that. So awesome. Good question. You can keep the mic.
Yes, and then also something else with the theming, right? Power Apps, when you apply a theme, in actual fact, a find and replace. On something like a form, it's got. What I found is that you replace the colors with theme variables, I guess.
Yeah.
And that applies the non-generic controls.
Exactly. Oh, that's a great tip. That's find and replace is phenomenal. It just makes life so easy if you've got all of these collections and variables, and you try and standardize on these things, and you say, I'm going to rename that variable, just find it everywhere in the app and give it a new name. That's very, very good. Right, so the next is really so fixed. Okay, that was an easy one. All right, so the next thing is a pivot, and you can think of a pivot in multiple ways. So first of all, these things are pivots over here. But also, if you think about tabs on top of a screen or on top of a form or on top of a collection or anything like that, you can throw a pivot at it and do these wonderful things. So think of like on tabs, what we've done with this is we say shared with me and then it's got a number in it. We use this on tabs on a form to show how many fields in that tab currently are mandatory that you haven't completed yet. So you can't submit the form until you've submitted or completed those 3 fields in that tab. And all of this works extremely well out of the box. It also has an overflow. So if for whatever reason it can't fit into the screen, it'll just magically do that for you. You don't have to go and create galleries and hide them with up context variables and hoping and stuff. So this is a phenomenal. So the pivot is actually a great add as well. All right, the next one is brilliant. It's called the Fluent Details List. Now, you can do a lot with a gallery to make a table list look good, but it takes a serious amount of effort. If you've ever used a data table, those things are useless. You don't display data with data tables. They're very limited and they're ugly. Where with this thing, it gives you so much out of the box. So this is an example of a Fluent Details list. And the fact that this has been created in such a way that it looks like a file, like a OneDrive list, is just what they've done. You could make this thing look like anything. In addition to this, you can have column sorting. So you click on the columns and it sorts your data. And the beautiful thing is if you use Dataverse in the backend, all of these things work much better with Dataverse than with SharePoint. With SharePoint, it works and we've used it successfully, but there's some things you need to do. With Dataverse, this lights up out of the box. Where you click on this thing, it sorts the data, sorts out delegation issues, all of those sort of things for you. And you can also resize your columns. So if you click on the column in runtime, you can change the size of the column. So that just takes that user experience to that next level. All right, so that's a basic list. Fine. So these are just examples of what you could do with those lists. You can also display icons and images in the list. You can have multiple rows inside of an item. So I think one of the following examples shows that. Yes, so you can do something like this. So it shows you account and then the region. It shows you tags. You can do hashtags. You can display SVGs, inline icons, all of this. How pretty is this? Phenomenal. Okay, and paging. And there's one small bug actually on the Power App side, not on this side, that's preventing this from working swimmingly with SharePoint. And we've tested this with lists with 30,000 items in the list. Paging actually works brilliantly. So this is a big one. This is really, really good. We've reported that bug. I'm sure once that's going to be fixed, it actually nothing to do with this component, but once that's fixed, this is going to work like an absolute charm. So yes. SharePoint.
The reason I'm asking is because there's that limitation in SharePoint with the 5,000 items issue.
So there's a couple of issues with SharePoint. So that particular one, so there's the first issue with delegation, which is in the app. And that's that where people just go and up the rows to return from 500 to 2,000. That's not a solution, keep it to 500. The second problem, if your delegation, your queries are set up properly, delegation isn't an issue. But that 5,001 you're talking about is a view limit in SharePoint. And all you need to do is, if you're gonna retrieve a column from SharePoint that you're doing a sort function on, if that's not indexed, it gives you an error in the backend, and then it doesn't return the data. But if you go and add that column to the index in the SharePoint list, problem solved. just keep in mind you can only do 20, I think, 20 columns per list that you can add to an index. But all it means you won't be able to sort with the others. You know, so 20 is a decent number. So, but then there's no problem with. We actually ran a test, Michael. I don't know if you remember that a couple of years ago. I created a SharePoint list because I wanted to hammer this thing. I wanted to see what Power Apps can do with a SharePoint list. And I had this flow that would just create thousands of SharePoint entries. And I sort of forgot about this flow, and it was just running. And I still don't know how they got to Michael. But Michael contacted me and said, maybe you can elaborate, but somebody somewhere from Microsoft said, there's a company called Ukavuma in South Africa that's got a SharePoint list with, I think it was 20 million or something. This thing was huge. So Michael's asked, please can you delete this thing Microsoft's complaining about? So there you'll see the paging. These are icons, by the way. So this is not a component, but it's very easy to build. And then you just pass input parameters into the component, and you tell it you want the next page, and then it works. It's phenomenal how well this works. All right, so for these ones, I'm gonna go through a little bit quicker. So things like tagging. So this is awesome. Tag list. Similar. Progress bar, so you've got a spinner, obviously. There's a spinner. Progress indicator is somewhere here. Feels like I should have. Hey, there we go. Do's and don'ts. Don't hide the progress indicator. Okay, so that's just a little line that just shows you percentage, you know, how far you've progressed with this. And there we get to panels and dialogues. So if you go and say, open the panel, this area over here, that's what I spoke about earlier. Got a content section, sits about here. And then if you have an external, in the app, if you put a telecontrol to follow that area, it'll always sit on top of it. So it's really easy to do into style. Is that a hand up or a yawn? All right, and then dialogue. So this is pretty cool. It's pretty basic. There's sorry. Yes. Absolutely. Yes. Okay. All right. So it's pretty. You can give it customized buttons, and then you can catch the buttons that come back. So that's pretty cool, and that works well for text input. We're doing a lot of work on the pop-up component. There's a big version of that coming out. It's got attachments. Yes. Microphone? No, no.
No, I didn't say a question. I was saying I was just adding to it, and the side window that you can actually add it on your own, like code it using the designer feature on top of your Canvas apps or model-driven apps, just to give a new user experience, so they don't have to click multiple. So they can same screen, decide if they have to add any extra information and come back.
Yeah, it's a good point. All right, and then elevation. This is the drop shadows, and it really looks slick. It just takes the app to the next level if you've got these little shadows. It just does something to the eye. So, all right, and then keyboard shortcuts. How's them apples? How do you like that? Keyboard shortcuts. Hey, who knew? All right, so that's that's the reference app, and I recommend that you spend some time with that, get some red wine, and jump onto the reference app. Next thing I'm going to show you is, first of all, the theme designer, and then I'm going to show you how to use that in an actual Canvas app. So here you can give it some colors. So you put it in there, tell it with the text in the background, and it'll give you a quick preview, and it'll give you an accessibility checker just right here and then before you go and spend all the time in the app, and then Power Apps tells you there's something wrong with your accessibility. So this works wonders, and this gives you the palette slots that it's going to create for you, and then you can simply go and copy and paste this into your app, and then everything lights up. There's also semantic slots, so there you can go and check typically where you'd use those things, and this is phenomenal. They didn't create this on a Sunday afternoon. Right, so then export theme gives you this, which looks quite scary if you look at it at first, but it's actually not at all. All you do, you select it. Oh, that would have been wonderful. You copy that and then you'll use it later. Right, next thing I'm going to show you is the canvas template, and this is where all of these things now come to life. To use this, how much time do we still have? So not, right, so to use this, the idea is that you shouldn't just go and change it there, because that's going to create an unmanaged layer and put in the default environment. Sorry, Mona? 4 minutes. Okay. So the idea is that you create a new solution, and actually do that quickly. It is quite important. So let's say you're busy creating a CRM. So you're too stingy and you don't want to buy Dynamics, so you're going to build your own. So yeah, good luck. Right, so you go and create a solution, open that solution, and when it's finished, you simply go and say add existing, Canvas app. It'll give you a list. You tell it to use the Canvas template, add it to my solution. Afterwards, I'll go and edit this, save a copy of it. We'll put it in the same solution in my solution, not in the other one. And then from there, you can actually go and work with it. So it's not too scary. It's explained well in the Microsoft documentation or in the GitHub stuff. But right, so that's essentially what you need to do. New. Yes. Correct. And that gives you a few things. The first of all, they've taken out all of those terrible scaling things and whatever, so this app is responsive out of the box. Second thing is it gives you some basic screen layouts. So it gives you a header, gives you some layout containers, and this is probably the most useful, is it gives you all of the controls that have already been styled. So that code that I copied earlier on, you see that I've on start, we've got all of that's being written into a variable called app theme. So if you now get a new code or new palette from the theme generator, you'll simply go and paste it in here. Replace that, paste it in there, and all of the components just light up with your new. That's fantastic. Yes.
So this is, if I'm building a brand new app, then I should use this template and start from this, and life is good. But I've got an existing app that I just want to go and add a few of these controls. So I do that.
Yeah, so you'll go and add them as components. So if you go into those apps, you'll see if you go to the components and you say add component, it will give you an option for canvas or code. You'll choose canvas or code depending on what it is you're looking for, and you'll just add them.
Okay, so you just add it like a normal component.
Yes. What isn't a good idea is to still create a variable like this somewhere in your app, then you'll link the styling of the theming to those components. You don't have to write all of that from scratch. So they'll light up regardless of how you give them that variable. All right, so let me go and save my CRM. And all right, so I'm going to run through this very quickly. I think we are 11. It's fine. Okay, so you'll start throwing me with nachos when I'm. Okay. I'll stop when I hear snoring. I'll stop when the food is here. Cool. So now I've saved that app. I can go and edit it through the normal editor or through the solution. Doesn't really matter. Let's jump into this quickly and show you how easy it is to just get these things up and going now. So it just says the app may contain some code. It might be unsafe. Do you trust them? Hope so. Right, so there you've got two screens. The one is your template screen and the other one is your control screen. With that, so let's go and create a list screen. So let's say we want to create a screen where we're going to list all of our accounts on, for an example, for our new CRM app. So I'll just move that top. We make that big a difference, but let's just go and call this listing screen. Right, so this is quite small. Let me get rid of that. Zoom in a little bit over here. And then you'll see right at the top, you've got a component. And there you can go and give it the title and these sort of things. So that's a very basic component. It'll give you a logo and a title, nothing else more. Usually we create components that's got a little X at the top, so you can close the app from there and a little help file and these sort of things. So that's good, but it's not that good. Then under the center container, this is where you can now start actually put your content. You'll see there's a subheader. The first thing we want to do is to add a command bar, because you want to now be able to do things from this listing screen. So I'll simply go to the control screen. We'll go and look for the command bar. There's a detailed list that's trigger happy. So I'll copy the command bar, go into the app, into that screen. Amazing how the Lenovo, the gestures on the pad just doesn't work as well as on a Mac. Either touchpad or Lenovo or Microsoft, you can choose. Not me, no. You know that saying of the guy who said that he's never wrong. One time he thought he was wrong, but he was wrong. He was actually right. Right, so let's try that again. And of course, it didn't save that. All my hard work lost. Okay. Now we're going to take the in. Okay. So now I'm just simply going to paste that command bar. Somehow didn't save that. Here's the details list being trigger happy again. So I'm just going to paste the command bar in there. Is this thing doing now? Okay, so very small, but it's there. Make it a little bit bigger. And there's my command bar. So you can directly into it. Let's just make it a little bit wider. So the parent with. We're not planning to put anything else in that section, so we can just have it use the whole width. You'll see there we've got new, edit, delete, refresh. You click on it and you go to items. You'll see we actually configure those commands. So see there it's the item key, the item display name, and then the icon or the icon name. The item display name and the item icon name. There are other properties, so it's not only limited by this. So if you're going to have a look at the documentation, you see you can set it to visible, yes, no. So you might only want the edit command to be visible once you've selected something in the list gallery or the list grid. Things like disabling and all of these sort of things. So that you'll do under the item section, and already styled, it's picking up the variable for the styling, all of these sort of things out of the box. You'll see there's a theme input property or input parameter. That's where it's passing that whole palette into this component, and it just does what it needs to. What we've also done is we've created SharePoint lists that actually simulates the palette, so you can control all of your apps from a central place. So the first thing you do in the app loads, it just finds all of those, the palette from a SharePoint list or a Dataverse table, and then it just lights up all of the apps. So if you want to make changing to your CI, you can do it in central place. It will affect all of your applications. So that actually works very well. Right, so that's the command bar. Now we say we want a, what do we want? So this fluent details list, throw that onto the screen. What about there? And same thing, we just might want to change the width and the height. So you've seen if you just type parent and then it sort of realizes because you're in the width properly, you're probably looking for a parent width. Thank you, Microsoft. I'd like to know if that's AI or if that's hard-coded in there. All right, so there's my data. So if I now preview this, there it sits. It's picking up my table from, this is now connected to Dataverse. It works the same with SharePoint. Some other formulas you just need to add into SharePoint. All of that's in the documentation in GitHub. But essentially, you can change the sorting. You can change the column width. All of those things just work out of the box. Yes, so inside of the component, so on the on the right pane, you can go and specify the data source in which columns to show. And then it's got a whole lot of parameters where you can set this. So you can go and do, if you go to columns, items, you'll see there's a table, and again, all of these properties are listed in the documentation. But here you can say whether the column is a child of another column, and then it automatically creates stacks it, and it creates a multi-row item. Or you can say what the width of it should be. Should it be sortable? So if somebody clicks on it, should something happen? Should you be able to change the width, full size, resizable, phenomenal stuff. Right? They're really cool. And then all of those things that you saw in those earlier examples with those sexy tags and all of these sort of things are just parameters that you're passing it through this table in PowerFX. So from here, you then get on select events as well as on change events. So if you double click on this, you'll see there it triggers and it tells you which item you've selected. And then you can then say, take that item, open up a form and display the information. So it's yeah, phenomenal. And this is in its like third release, its third preview release. I can just imagine what this is going to look like in a year from now. So, you want the mic? Don't know who put that in there. layout containers. Yeah. So you'll see all of these things. Layout containers changed my life. So you'll see most of these things sit in layout containers. The, yeah. Yeah, very, very good. All right, so there we've got a basic app. If we wanted to do a similar thing and create a form, let's go and duplicate that screen. Take the in. Right, so from here, you'll simply go and give it a command bar again. Command bar, there's the command bar. And here you'll change it to now typically be save and delete, and these sort of things. Exactly the same way as we showed earlier. And then you can also go and put a form in here. Yes, you can. But with this looking so cool. Yeah. So yeah, and I think that's maybe that should be a community discussion so that's a good question, So if you've got the licensing for Dataverse, then obviously you've got the ability from a licensing and the capability to build a model-driven app. So then there needs to be a very strong use case for building a Canvas app. But sometimes, I think especially with custom pages, you can get a lot of the Canvas functionality, the pixel perfect stuff, into a model-driven app. So. Yeah. So there's an example of a form. It's not showing because it's not didn't create a new form function. So, but I think you get the idea. And it's similar for all of these things. Very easy to style. Very. Any questions? Anything in specific that you wanna know or see how it works or how it's done? No, I'm sure. Look, we have an open floor at the end of this, so absolutely, yeah. All right, so who's going to go and play with the Creator Kit tonight at 8 o'clock when they get home? Yeah, this is a must. I mean, if you're going to be doing Canvas apps. So do you have a question? Yeah, absolutely. Give it a good kick and see. Just want to show you the documentation that in GitHub. Yeah, we'll share the links as well. Okay, so typically you'll start with dev and get the news version in there and not just jump into production and start importing it. That's the right thing. That's a consultant answer. Okay. All right, so I'm not going to bore you and look for this link. I'll just post it on the. All right, any other questions? Anything you want to see or ask? Yeah, I'm asking anybody on the call as well. So I see Michael's on the call. Michael, do you have any questions? Ian, Sifle?
No, it looks great. Just want to
No
go
question
play
on
with
the
it.
side. Thank you.
What you guys having for lunch where you're at right now, or for dinner? What are we having, by the way? Hamburgers. Okay. All right. So what's next on the agenda? So that's a good question. Maybe we should open it up now. Get the creative juices flowing. So during lockdown, we started the session at 4:30. 4. Before lockdown, we used to start at 6. Okay, so there's quite a big difference. I also forgot about it. But now the question is, now that we're doing these hybrid events, is it 4 or is it 6? Or 4:30? What? Okay. Okay. And Michael is much better looking than the other guy. What we could maybe, with the online guys, because we had some requests from guys asking, 4 o'clock is tight for them, they're still in the office. So would it be a good compromise to say that the guys who still have to work at 4 o'clock, that they join online, or 4:30? For the guys that are online, you guys can say as well. What are your thoughts on this? Is it 4:30 or is it 6?
4:30.
Yeah, but seriously, you have to put in leave for this last half an hour, right? All right, so let's check. So next on the agenda, yeah, we missed it in the news because we lost Jonathan. So with the creator kit in the backdrop, what is your favorite? And this is the community discussion, so this is open to everybody. I'm going to shut up now and let you guys talk. So the microphone is going to do some traveling, and then we've got guys online. So what are your favorite components or build tools that you typically find that's the first things you go and add into your apps when you start a new app? Anything in particular? So now we have the creator kit, but are there other things that you guys typically use a lot? It's a short community discussion. Third party, so built other than what's in the box. So if you like the creator kit, for me, that would be the first thing I'll go and add into an app. Yeah, that's phenomenal.
There's an awesome pop-up component out there. That's the first thing I always put in.
That's the right answer. Heard about it. So, yeah, who of you guys use the pop-up component? Okay, that's interesting. Okay, that's very interesting. So, quite looking forward to Power Apps, Power Automate also using Power FX. That's coming. Can you imagine? You don't no longer have to write these expressions. So, if you want to, I can give you a quick sneak peek into the new version of the model pop-up, and this is what Mike was referring to earlier. So, okay, so this is a component that we released to the community a couple of years ago, and we're busy with quite a beefy new version of this. The first thing is this thing uses collections to talk to the app, which Microsoft now said, no, you can't do that anymore. Or actually you can. There's a setting in the component that you can say that it's got access to the app scope And then you can actually get access to more things than just collections, which is brilliant. But that doesn't work if the component is in a component library, which of course you want to do because you want to keep it centralized. So we rewrote a whole lot of this thing to make it work with input parameters and behavioral parameters. So that's pretty cool. But some of the additional things that's coming down the line is also an icon, a bit of a heading. And what all of these buttons do is they just give you a use case of what you can do with this pop-up. And this thing is, again, componentized, so you don't have to create all of these different things. So there's still some of the old favorites like yes, no, cancel, all of these buttons. You can change the button orientation as well to horizontal instead of vertical. We had somebody in the community ask for that. But one of the very big things, so I think most of these things you guys have seen in the past, you can do things like signatures. Click on OK, and you'll see there it actually writes it into the app, so you can then upload it to SharePoint. Office 365 users, so you can have a people picker, and it writes it back into the app. All of those things out of the box. But one of the biggest functionality is an actual attachment section. So this creates this pop-up. It allows you to go and select files. I can go and say, no, not that one. So you can just remove that from the list. So you can also add multiples. Okay, so that gives you the app. It gives you an opportunity to categorize it. So you might, and that's all optional. So you can say what kind of file is this? Is it a quotation or a quote acceptance or whatever the case may be? And there's also a caption. Yeah. Exactly. Slightly there. Yeah. You could have this as a yeah. You'll see you can force certain file formats. So that last file format I selected wasn't part of that. And it's also part of the properties. You just pass these properties to the component. You say pop up, and it lights up, and it sizes. So you can limit the file sizes and these sort of things. And if I click on OK, it writes it back into the application. Yes. Yes. So that over there is a normal attachment control that you only get in a form. So we took it out of the form. It's not the image upload. So we took it out of the form, and we've got some tricketry and wizardry happening there to make that thing show up there in the way that it does. So you don't have to go and do that. So I have to say, this is probably, if I create a new app, the first thing that I go and do, because I absolutely refuse to go and manually build this every time with, if there's a bug, it's this file format not allowed. Make a note. Yeah, so if you go to aka.ms/powerapps-popup, this is the current published version doesn't include the attachments, and it still uses collections, but there's essentially the document on how to download it, how to install it, and what all of these properties do, and so on. So yeah, you can go and have a look at that. So good. Any questions? Anybody online with some questions? Not.
Just more of a main topic next month is adaptive cards. Hey? What? Not adaptive cards?
So yeah, that's the one that's been moved on.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, so any other questions? Anybody else with something to share? Do we keep it at 4:30? Keep it a hybrid? Next time we'll make sure Microsoft's the equipment works. No, I'm kidding. It's actually the presenter. All right, good. So I think open floor, we've passed that bit. Tech tip, I've bored you enough, so I don't think there's anything else that I want to give you from a tech tip perspective. So thank you very much for your time, everybody. And well, I see some styrofoam at the back there, so I think that's good. Yeah, let's go and have dinner. Thanks, everybody. Have a good day.
Thank you.
What? Hand clap, yeah. Usually it's just things coming up on the screen. Thanks, everybody online.